Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the IIAT sponsored Cyber Coverage Explained. I'm Brad Schrum. I oversee the relationship with the Independent Agents of Texas, the IIAT. We thank you for joining us today, and we promise that this will take no more than 30 minutes. If you have any questions, you'll see where you can ask the questions, and we promise to answer them. Feel free to ask them during the presentation or at the end. We're going to take like the first 25 minutes at most to go through this, and the last 5 minutes we're going to give you a quick demonstration of the Wingman platform. On the line, I think we have many of you who are using the platform now, and those are not. Hopefully you'll be able to sign up and start using it. So with that, I would also like to introduce my counterpart, Ellie Feldman. Ellie, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Brad. Thank you guys all for joining us. I'm Ellie Feldman. I work with Brad at Wingman, and I hope to be able to teach you a little bit about cyber coverage today and answer any questions you might have about coverage.
Great, Ellie. Thanks a lot. So we're going to take a deeper dive into the coverages, and first we're going to go how the policy is structured. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Ellie.
Thanks, Brad. I think the first lesson I can give you guys as you're looking at any type of cyber coverage is that it's broken up into essentially 3 parts. The first part is going to be your third-party coverages. The second part is going to be your primary first-party coverages. And then there's always the option for additional coverages by endorsement at the end of the policy. So what I think we can do, Brad, is if we just want to walk through what is included in each of these sections, it'll give everybody a better understanding of what to look for in a good cyber policy, what should be included, and any red flags to look out for as you're looking at or comparing cyber forms.
Great, so we'll break it down, but we want to, like Ellie said, we just want to let you know it is first and third party. Sometimes we get questioned, is this only a first party policy? It is not. This gives you a full suite. So with that, Ellie, let's go through the quote letter and the roadmap one before that, but let's go through the third-party coverages. I'll let you start.
So the first thing I can tell you about third-party coverage is it's the backbone of what was historically the only cyber coverage that was offered. And that is the lawsuit triggered old school claims made cyber coverage. It usually falls into one of 2 buckets, and a decent cyber policy is going to have express coverage for both of these things. The first is for an actual, what you'll call a cyber event. Every policy is going to name it something differently, whether it be an enterprise security event or a data breach or whatever. But it all results in the same, and that is a class action lawsuit because of an unauthorized access or a data theft, loss, or disclosure. And you have to have coverage for this. It's not a huge claim driver as much anymore for small to medium-sized businesses, but it remains a constant threat if any of your insureds have any large number of records for their customers. And the second bucket for third-party coverage, which is actually now the more prevalent coverage that we're seeing used, is the privacy regulation coverage. So that's when, let's say, the state of California has a very strict rule about data disclosure. If one of your insureds does business in California and they have a data breach, if they don't file with the state of California, notify their customers in a specific way, they're going to essentially be sued for fines and penalties by the state of California. I'll also mention just quickly on this coverage that the GDPR, which is the European Union's data protection law, applies to all citizens of the European Union, regardless of where they are in the world. It's insane. The rules are crazy and the penalties are bonkers. And so if you have any customers that do any business with European Union citizens, having privacy regulation coverage that includes the GDPR becomes very, very important.
Great. So that would be the third-party coverages. Now let's get into some of the first-party coverages, Ellie.
So one of the questions we get asked most frequently is how a standalone policy differs from a BOP policy in regards to coverage itself. And the first place I tell you to look for the differences is in the limits. And oftentimes they'll have incredibly low limits. So the first thing I'll tell you for both third and first party, but particularly the coverage you're looking at here, it is incredibly important to have full limit coverage for each of the items listed, and I'll run through them now. The
Great.
first and most frequently talked about is what Access Insurance Company, who we work with, calls crisis management, but many others call breach notification expenses. This is the expense that's actually incurred by a company to notify its customers that a data breach of their private information has occurred. It goes hand in hand with the fraud response coverage, which is specifically the credit monitoring and ID theft monitoring for the loss of credit card numbers or social security numbers or driver's license numbers that in many states is legally required for any record that's lost or for any customer that you have. And a lot of times in the BOP coverage, these are going to be sublimited to very small amounts, anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. The problem lies with the fact that on average, these two coverages can cost in excess of $225 each for each record that a company holds. So how quickly would that coverage be eroded? And the answer is too quickly. So getting a full limit, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever your customer might need, is very important in these coverages. To round out the standard first party coverages sections, we have PR expenses, which, believe it or not, can be incredibly high. And that includes advertising to mitigate the loss, websites that must be set up to let customers know that a data breach has occurred and how to respond to it, and much, much more. The forensics and the legal are bringing in experts to your customer's office to make sure that whatever malicious code, whatever bad stuff is on their computers has properly been taken out, and the legal people will be there to see if they can figure out how the breach occurred and to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then finally, cyber extortion. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in a later section because it goes hand in hand with another coverage, which is ransomware. But a lot of policies have this. It is unclear if they include ransomware in it, which is why it's very important that you make sure you have coverage for both extortion and ransomware in a policy. But I'll give you more details on that in a second.
Great. So let's talk about the business income.
So Brad, we talk a lot about business interruption coverage because it becomes such a big claim driver from a cost perspective. And so as you guys as agents, what you need to know is that it's typically broken down into three areas. The first one is a system disruption. So that means that your insured owns their computer system, manages their computer system, and that system goes down and they're unable to work for an extended period of time. This is often coupled with, say, a ransomware attack, which is another coverage that should be included separate from this. What happens is to get that bad stuff off your computers, it can take weeks. And during that time, you might not have access to your computers. Your insureds might not be able to be continuing to do business, and it can be incredibly detrimental to the ability for that company to continue to work. And so having a strong business interruption coverage is very important to maintain the company itself in case something bad like this happens. And when I say in case, I mean when, because this occurs quite frequently. The corollary to that is that many companies, and I'll use the example of a doctor's office, don't actually own or maintain their computer systems. They rely on third parties. So let's say you use an online patient management system that you pay somebody else for, and by contract it needs to be working. But let's say that patient management system that you don't own but you pay for goes down for 2 weeks, a month, whatever, because of some crazy cyber incident, and you don't have access to patient charts, or whatever you need to be doing your business. Another example for service disruption would be, let's say you're an e-commerce company or even a restaurant and your payment system goes down that you contract and you pay to use. If you can't make money because they've had a data breach, having coverage in your cyber policy for that has now become something that you can easily do. And finally, the third piece of a good business interruption is the data recovery. It can often take a very long time for data recovery to occur and a lot of resources. So we encourage you to make sure that there's a solid data recovery, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the coverage that's going to allow the insurance company to pay for someone to come in and recreate data that's been lost.
I think it's important to remember, like you said, Ellie, make sure you have first and third party coverage. One of our clients did sustain a very large business income loss. I think it was around $800,000, Ellie, if you recall, last year. So we've seen it in play, and it all had to do with the ransomware, which we certainly will.
Exactly.
And now let's talk about PCI fines, or payment card industry fines. Go ahead, Ellie.
So this was the coverage that started the cyber revolution, the cyber insurance revolution in a sense. Credit card numbers were being stolen at a crazy pace. And so basically there was an international body that got together and told all credit card companies that they had to maintain certain minimum standards to be considered certified to handle credit cards. And that is called the PCI DSS standard. Now, having this coverage in a cyber policy, if your insured takes any credit cards of any kind, is very important. And much like the GDPR coverage I mentioned before, this is because the fines and penalties for this coverage can be astronomical. If you do not follow the PCI compliance requirements, the fines are insane. And so we include coverage to make sure that everything is included from the PCI standards. And that includes, for example, the costs of the chargebacks on the credit cards. That is when there's a fraudulent charge on your card and you notify the credit card company that this is a fraudulent charge. Oftentimes, the company who made the charge is charged a fine. And so we want to make sure that if your company is charged that fine, you're able to recoup those expenses. It's not as common of a claim driver as it once was, but it is very important to have if any of your insureds actually do process credit cards.
And if anybody's interested, DSS definition is data security standard. So, and PCI is payment card industry. Okay, great. Let's go on to the next one. Website media, Ellie.
So most of you guys understand media liability coverage. It's going to cover your copyright, your libel, etc. What we have found is that the tightening of this coverage on, say, a bot policy is limiting the ability for online presences to be covered, if not expressly granted. So many cyber policies are now picking up the slack in that area. I will tell you, some companies are offering full-blown media. Most are only offering online media, meaning not print. And it's important because, as I said, it can often be excluded. And if your insured doesn't have an E&O policy with a full-blown media liability section, they could be underinsured in this area simply by having a comment section on their website, a blog on their website, an email blast with content, anything like that can lead to copyright, libel, etc. claims that could cheaply be covered in the website media section of a good cyber policy.
Okay. Great. Now let's talk about a real big coverage, and that is ransomware.
Many of you guys have probably heard or read in a lot of the trade publications about cyber the rising trend of ransomware. It has become an incredibly cheap and effective tool for hackers to gain access to people's computers. And here's how it works. Imagine one of your employees is clicking through Facebook or on an attachment from their email and aren't really paying attention, and they open it, and nothing really happens at the time. But what is happening that you're not seeing is a piece of malware or malicious code is being injected into your computers and any other computers that are networked to the computer that it's downloaded onto. This can lead to a lot of things, but the biggest concern is ransomware attacks. So I told you earlier we'd be talking about ransomware as a juxtaposition to extortion. They both function in exactly the same way. The bad code gets into your system, and then somebody turns that bad code on, which locks you out of your computer system, and you basically get a black screen that says you have 24 hours to pay this amount of money, or in the case of ransomware, it's or I lock you out of your system for good. And in the case of extortion, it's I will release all of your private data if you don't pay us. So they're extorting you to not release information, or they're ransoming you to delete all of your information. They are very similar in the way that they operate, but oftentimes in a cyber policy, the coverage is crafted so that it only applies to one and not both, which is why it's important to talk about both of them and how they're used and how prevalent they have become. You can buy a kit online to do your own ransomware attacks for as little as $200. And each attack now can oftentimes yield $50,000 to $100,000 in ransom each time that they use it. So it's an incredibly cost-effective tool for bad actors to use this against your clients. And so to have full limit coverage becomes really important.
The average ransomware claim that we've seen through Access is about $32,000, just to give you a sense. The largest one we have seen is 150,000, just to give you a sense. But this is the largest frequency and severity of claims that we are seeing right now. So that's ransomware, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced it or seen it. Let's talk about social engineering, another big coverage. Ellie, do you want to define what social engineering is and what it does?
Absolutely. And I'll also reiterate Brad's point that if you have any questions for either of us, use the questions box on your screen and we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. Social engineering is the scary story that everybody talks about in the cyber world without ever really defining it well. It is when a fraudulent request for money is made and then paid. Let me give you an example to make so that it'll make a little bit more sense. And this example comes from our company. So I can tell you that it happens and it happens frequently. Our CFO got an email from our CEO saying, here's the invoice for blah, 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 whatever it was. It was a $50,000 invoice, and here's the routing number. Can you wire them the money? Now, fortunately, we're a smaller company. We all know each other, and our CFO thought better of, this doesn't sound right. Why would we be buying something crazy? I think it was like chandeliers or, from, I don't even remember, somewhere crazy. And so the CFO picked up the phone to the CEO and said, did you really want me to pay this? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he took a closer look at the email address. And as it turns out, while at a cursory glance, it looked like the email was from the CEO, it wasn't actually from the CEO. Now, here's the more common situation. And I'll tell you, this happens all the time, and people will pay that money because it's a big company and you do what the CEO says, and that money is gone forever. A social engineering coverage will pay you that money back up to a certain amount. The more common example we're seeing today is a phone call from an employee that says, I have a new bank account number. Can you change the direct deposit information on my for my payroll. And the payroll person says, of course, and they do it. And of course, that wasn't the person. That wasn't the real employee. It can come via email or phone call. Either one of those can trigger a social engineering claim. And any of that money that's paid out to the wrong bank account, you really can't recover. So these are the most common examples of a social engineering claim. The spoofing of an email is really the most common way you're going to see it, but it is often very expressly excluded from the limited crime coverages in a BOP because the theft is considered digital. Or they'll have incredibly low limits like $10,000, which oftentimes doesn't help. The average we see in the industry for this, by the way, from a limits perspective, is 100,000. A great policy is 250,000. Larger companies, or I will say, can sometimes get up to $1 million of coverage for social engineering, but they're usually going to ask additional questions on what practices are in place to prevent these situations from occurring. Now, I will mention one other thing that is rarely talked about in the cyber world, but is incredibly important for your customers. And that is that most of the policies have a good faith requirement that says that you didn't have any idea that this was a bad payment. So that's going to weed out some of the fraud by employees type claims.
Good, Ellie. Good explanation. I think we got a question in from Kim that I think you just answered. What was the highest limit? And you're right. We're going to ask some additional questions, Kim. Usually it's going to be on risks that are over 100 million in revenue to get those increases, but certainly we can talk about it with you. The other question we just got in, Ellie, are the limits of insurance per scheduled loss or are they aggregate?
So that's a great question. On the policy that we're currently selling, it's both. If there's a per claim limit for each of these coverages and an aggregate policy limit. It is something that you should look out for in other policies to just make sure that you're getting full per claim limits for each of the major coverages that we've discussed thus far and will continue to discuss. And but it is something that you should look out for, that it isn't just an aggregate limit, or that you're not paying for per claim limits with no aggregate when that's not necessarily needed.
And also, to finish that up, the deductible is an aggregate deductible. Once you hit the deductible, it's finished for the year. We also got a question in from Greg, is what is the trigger for payment of a ransomware claim, and how should an attacked individual proceed?
That's a great question, Greg. We actually had a call yesterday with our claims department who really stressed that more often than not, paying the ransom within the time limit requested is oftentimes the best way of handling the situation. We agree with that. We think that while morally we don't like paying the bad guys to get our stuff back, it can often be incredibly detrimental to lose your data to a ransomware attack. And sometimes, depending on the request, it could be worthwhile to do it. And you bring up the most important point, Greg, and that is telling your cyber insurance carrier the second the ransomware attack comes in is the difference between a $100,000 claim and a multi-million-dollar claim. The faster they can see what's happening, try to diagnose the problem, see what kind of backups you've got to determine whether or not they should pay the ransom immediately or not, those are vital. And so it behooves you to both teach your insureds the importance of calling their insurance carrier the second they suspect any bad cyber activity, and the second that they know that something bad has happened, and for you guys to do the same when it comes into you. So great question. It's a big one.
Yeah, and that we would tell you, Greg, that we advise and for the insured to contact the data breach coach immediately when it happens, and then you report the claim. Usually ransomware is paid in Bitcoin primarily, or cryptocurrency, because it cannot be traced. We got another question. This is a good question. I should have answered it at the beginning. Will you provide a copy of the presentation? Absolutely. Everybody who was on this seminar will get a copy of the presentation. Correct, Ellie?
We can certainly do that for you. I will also tell you there is a handout in the handout section on your screen that has a Cliff's Notes version of what we're talking about, each of the coverages that should be included in the cyber policy and what each one means. You should download it now. If you have any issues downloading it, send an email to help@wingmancyber.com and we will get you the help that you need.
Great. All right. I know we need to get through these and do a quick presentation, so I'll let you finish up. Section 8.
Fortunately for you, Brad, telecom fraud, not a commonly used coverage. I will tell you that it covers the fraudulent third-party use of your telephone system in a scam. Not the most common occurrence in 2019. It was a common occurrence when all of these policies were originally written in 2004. But it is there just in case it happens. It is a good coverage to have just in case it happens because the service charges and fees can get astronomical. And
Okay, let's talk about reputational harm as we wrap it up.
I'll finish up the coverage with reputational harm. And I'll reiterate again that these are the commonly used coverages that your standalone cyber policy should have. Some companies offer some other stuff, some crazy stuff like D&O for cyber incidents and things like that. And those are well and good if they're very important to your insured. But for the most part, these are the common things that should be included in a policy. And that now includes reputational harm. Think of it as an extension of business interruption, but maybe no downtime has occurred, but you've had a massive loss and you've lost a lot of revenue because of, PR and things like that. And it's really hit your reputation because of a cyber incident. We can take a look at the value of a company before and after a cyber incident, and reputational harm coverage will help repair the damage and keep them going to fix their reputation. So while a lot of carriers aren't necessarily doing this, it has become a very important coverage in the specific sense of cyber incidents are rapidly changing. And so this is one of those ways that good carriers are separating themselves because they're saying, we don't know if you're going to have a data breach. We don't know if you're going to have downtime, but we do know that there's a chance that a data incident is going to occur and it's going to hurt your company. And here's a broad way that we can say, we'll make sure to try to make you whole.
Great. We got a couple more questions, Ellie. Elizabeth has asked us if a company chooses to pay the ransomware to avoid further time to pass in accrued expenses, do we violate any policy provisions? Meaning, will we be penalized for paying basically admitting fault?
Not at all. There are specific instructions in the policy form that say, well, that a good policy will reimburse you for paying a ransomware. It does bring in the importance of timing when it comes to notifying the claims department that the incident has occurred. Again, the sooner the better. But a good policy should not have a provision that will penalize you for paying the ransom because it is incredibly commonplace at this point for all insurance companies to pay the ransom.
And last but not least, Darrow asks a great question. If ransom is paid, what is the guarantee that these clients' computers will be released? And I think we talked about that yesterday, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
If the ransom is paid, what is the guarantee that the client's computers will be released, that the keystroke will be the key to open it back up? So we paid the ransom, and now what happens?
We see this happen a lot. We make a lot of jokes about honor among thieves, but the reality is more often than not, it's going to work. More often than not, the encryption key that they give you, which is the way to unlock your data, will 100% work to get your data back. Are there outlying cases where it doesn't? Absolutely. But those people don't tend to collect additional ransoms. And so it really doesn't behoove them to be like that. It's a crazy world we live in, but it's the world that we live in. And so we haven't seen a lot of cases. I think I've heard of one or two where the encryption key didn't work, but for the most part, paying the ransom actually does work.
Great. I know we're going over a little and it won't take us that long, but here's a quick question. Business income and reputational harm, any co-insurance requirements?
No,
Right.
no, we're not. Not in the good
Okay.
policy anyway.
All right. Is there any onboarding training for new insureds to Wingman? We recently added 2 new accounts that have requested this, and that came in from Lacey.
Lacey, that's a great question. Why don't you email us help@wingmancyber.com. We'll get you set up and you let us know that you were on this webinar, and we can send you some video links and things like that to watch for the training. We can send you recordings of current and past webinars that will give you more information about cyber. We keep a good library of materials to help all of our agents learn that they have access to once they become a part of the Wingman cyber team, if you will. So it's yet another reason that these trainings, we do them about once a month. Each time it's a different topic. We keep all of our old recordings for you guys to watch whenever you'd like. So we have lots and lots of training opportunities for you.
Now, the other, it may have also, they have 2 new insureds. Your insureds have the ability to sign up for eRisk Hub to give them training, as well as our brokers. It's a plethora of information. So it's either Lacey or Rusty. Just send us and we'll get back to you on that. No other questions. So one more. Is there okay, here we go. Is there an application that you can provide? Is there an application you can provide that we can use to give to producers to attain the proper information? The answer is yes, we can. And that's coming from Carla. And we'll show you right now how that works, Carla, how easy it is to do. So let's go, Ellie, to a new account. First, I just want to show you down on the left-hand side, you'll see these 3 dots. And this is more for people who have not signed up with us with the IIAT. If you're interested, you can contact us directly or go through the IIAT, and we've signed up many brokers. They can do it, or we can do it directly for you. But this is our instant chat. So if you ever have any questions when you do sign up, our underwriters at Wingman are right there to answer your questions. So we're going to go through a quote, and the first thing I'll show you is this little dot right here. It says send cyber link to the applicant. You can send this electronically to the application to your client. So it'll go to them, they complete it, goes back into the file, and then you say to release it and get a quote. So let's just show you how easy it is to quote a cyber account with Wingman. So we're just going to call this IIAT doctor's office, put in some revenue for you. There you go. So we'll just say they do about 200,000. Now what we're doing here is we're showing you this works up to 100 million in revenue and 3 million or less in limits. Our average limit today is about 1.25 million, just to give you a sense.
But can we do higher limits, Brad?
Oh yeah, we can do up to $1 billion if you want. You just have to provide a little additional information.
No, I mean limits of insurance. Can you do more than 3 million limits of insurance?
Yes, we can do up to 5 million in limits, just to give you a sense that there's definitely an opportunity. We write all industry groups, okay? If you don't know the industry group, you go to other, put in doctor, and it'll tell you how to classify it.
If I could spell.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, I know where this one goes.
Yes.
I will tell you guys that 9 times out of 10, if you don't know what you're looking for, just use plain language and it'll figure it out. In this particular case, it's just healthcare.
So we're saying healthcare. We're almost done here, everybody. So you can click on healthcare records, personal information, records, or payment cards transaction. You have to click one of them, or you could click all 3, 2 or 3. The good news is we don't ask you for total number of records. We ask you for estimates. You'll like that a lot. All right, we're almost done. Remember, this is A+ paper with Access Insurance Company, and it is admitted. We ask you if you've had a prior theft or a prior claim. If you answer no, you're going to get an automatic quote. If you answer yes, you have to explain it and wait like a day. Voila, we're all done, everybody. You have a bindable quote. We do not need any wet signatures. We do not need any additional applications, and there's no warranties to the policies. Next, we help you by giving you a quote letter. Now, what you're going to find when you sign up with the IIAT/Wingman, you'll send us a copy of your logo. So everything will show up at the top where you say Wingman Insurance. That could say IIAT or ABC Insurance Agency. It will not show Wingman Insurance. So we quote this 1, 2, and 3 million for you, okay? And once we do that, and the client says to you, we're ready to buy, all you do is hit purchase coverage. And you'll see we offer 1, 2, and 3 million. And anything over $2,500, we offer you installments. Anything under is an annual premium. You say the insured is ready to buy. You put the effective date in. What's cool about what we do is we offer 6 to 18-month policies, 6 to 18 months. So you do have an option. If you need less than 12 months, just ask us and we'll reprice it, or over 12 months, we'll reprice it. Give us the billing contact name. Once you give us the billing contact name, this is where the electronic bill goes, and you're going to get a copy of that. The electronic bill goes to, has your name on it, does not have Wingman. Now the insured has the electronic bill. They have up to 14 days to pay that bill from the effective date to make it effective on the initial effective date. So a 5/1, they have up to 5/15 for it to be effective 5/1. Okay? Hope that makes sense. It is direct bill, direct bill. So we take care of all the billing for you, and we pay you 15% commission. All right? Once they pay the bill, we are an admitted market. Harold, you're asking us, are we an admitted market in Texas? Yes, we are. The only 2 states we are non-admitted are Vermont and Hawaii. So we are admitted in Texas. No worries there. Okay? Once they pay the bill, coverage is in effect. They have to pay the bill for coverage to be in effect. Okay? If they don't pay, there is no coverage. When they pay, the policy is in your inbox within 1 minute to deliver to your client, transaction completed. And 90 days before renewal, we ask you 2 questions. That's it, and the account is renewed. If the account does not want to purchase coverage today, you can go right back. Ellie, if you could show the search function, you'll see up in our little search function, you put the name of the account in, and then you'll be able to bind the account whenever you want. After 30 days, it expires, but you can refresh the quote. And as you see here, you can purchase it. We went through this pretty quickly. Those of you who are not appointed with Wingman IIAT, you can contact Ellie at wingmanins.com or Brad at wingmanins.com, or what's this, at help at wingmanins.com, Ellie?
Absolutely.
And then you can contact us this way. You fill out the paperwork, we'll train you, we'll give you your password, and you're ready to go. So with that, we're done. I do not see any other questions. We thank everybody for today, and hopefully those who have not signed up with us, we can sign you up, and those that are, we appreciate your business and look forward to it. Ellie, thank you, and thank you IIAT and their members.